My Weirdwood video is actually doing quite well. With my Steam being restored and momentum on my side, I should have no problem getting the people the ERAM and Friend video they want in a timely manner. Noodles. Sichuan the Spicy Lad is back in all their feathery, draconic splendor after way too much trouble trying to salvage this script, dear God. Nevertheless, I am back on my groove, and it's thanks to y'all for getting me back here. With that success, I put out a poll to see what my viewers, new and old, wanted for my next video. By a wide margin, the subject that won out was the demonic duo of Friend and ERAM. Besides the Roaring Knight, these two are the closest acting entities to Gaster, and emphasis on acting, being his fuck-ass cat and something. Beyond going over what we do know and are able to reasonably extrapolate, I have my own interpretations and speculation to add to the mix, like usual. A lot of this will involve the Weirdwood again, as should be expected, so this will also be my opportunity to cover and fix up what I couldn't last time. That's right. Despite having the lowest amount of votes in the poll, this is part 1.5 of the Weirdwood video in spirit. I've played you all for fools. I have won. Okay, enjoy the show. Starting with the more novel of our gremlins of the hour today, I will resist the temptation of Michael for now, as to go on about the more mysterious ERAM. ERAM's characterization is essentially the devil on Chris's shoulder, who also wants to corrupt the angel on the other shoulder into being a second devil. This is done by being the Lord of the Sword route, annex and guide to the Weird route, with many implication on how some other characters might have been influenced on the same subject. Works pretty well for the player, and evidently Chris, with our curiosity, desire for freedom, and for the former, having way too many connections to the Jaina route and Undertale as a whole. Fitting for its appearance, behavior, and motifs, ERAM's working name, derived from its encounter theme and the files for its battle theme, is that of a nightmare. Fear and giving in to violence is sort of its shtick, of which it gladly enables Chris and Noel to go hog wild, symbolically marrying each other, becoming stronger with their love, and to hell with everyone else. We being the god who sanctions and consecrates all of it. Not that the other one seems to mind. This also extends to Noel, both mechanically and personally, such that this route also serves to bend and condition her into releasing her inhibitions and feel the snow on her skin. Maybe one day, like the game ERAM generously provides for us, we may upgrade from the knife that creates to the sword that ends, provided we can unlock our dark bead from their set path, such that the two mortals may succumb to their own love, allowing for the angel to meet with its desire. To touch more on the nightmare side of ERAM, there is its many points of relation to the Knight and the Titans. Of course, also Friend, but you clicked on this video, you already know. Its visuals and acknowledgement of the shadow items are the big two things beyond the demon's etymology, but there's more. Not only are ERAM and the Roaring Knight seemingly roommates in Gaster's pad, but they even share clothes, as implied by Noelle if you tried and fail to equip the shadow mantle onto her, and to a lesser extent Dessa's wallpaper being that of Aurora Borealis, i.e. Northern Lights, localized entirely within her bedroom. There's also the Black Deer and Mantleboard 3, but I have no idea what to do with that. As for the Titans, the simultaneous fear of the unknown and one's intrusive thoughts and abandonment of mercy, moreover with the giving into such emotions, are ERAM's bread and butter. With the consolidation of the angel motif, determination, sound of water, and multiple musical callbacks to the holy are all the sweet port wine on the side. Really, it's quite easy to link all four of these together in like some sort of unholy polycule, but there might be one or two other characters that seek to make things more complex. More on those in a bit. Reeling back to just ERAM itself, there's one more thing I need to mention to fully cover the baseline that we're working with, although it is getting more into theoretical territory. To better conceptualize who ERAM is, we must also consider what ERAM is, as in what its light-world object might be if it's not some offshoot of a Titan or something. For this, I subscribe to the most popular theory. ERAM is Chris's devil horn headband, which they wore more often as a mischievous, troublemaking child. The amount of retakes I needed to make in order to say devil horn headband, it's surprisingly difficult for me. This would serve to explain its intimacy in prodding at Chris's insecurities and darkest thoughts rather eloquently, but even its door to the Ice Palace should just give it away almost immediately. It's kind of funny since fans, including myself, for about 7 years have contemplated Ralsei being the horns, but it appears that the real personification of the headwear was instead the diametric opposite in most regards. I wonder if these two are actually counterparts or something like that. I'll get into how their headband would wind up in the shelter to become associated with Gaster and the Knight in a bit, but for now, I think it's time to give ERAM's partner in crime its own due limelight. It's here, it's there, it's everywhere. Who are you gonna call? Image friend? That's it. Does anyone find it strange that we just had Friend for almost 4 years without ERAM? Just me? Well, then again, I guess I'm not one to talk. But anyway, on to Satan's silliest soldier. It's been hinted and visually established that Friend and Spamton have been inexorably linked in at least the latter's backstory. The eyes and basement appearance really give it away, and if you've been paying attention to the cat petter's business, all the better. Especially as it's heavily implied to be the mysterious Mike character. Something I was going to hold off for the speculation later in the video, but at this point in the game, come on. Given how Spamton talks about Mike in the Friends option, featuring a face not unlike Channeling Unused, and it's only blossomed from the sweepstakes and practically exploded in the new chapters proper, despite expressly neither Tenna nor the endearing microphonies knowing who the original Mike actually was, unlike the mailman himself. Ironic, given that these four also from which we have the most damning Mike Friend evidence of all, emphasized greatly by the new rendition of the Roots leitmotif in Bit Roots, first used in Spamton's leitmotif and is hammered home repeatedly in Catswing and more so in Airwaves, likely implying that this is actually Friend's leitmotif. If you don't believe me, take a listen. Spamton, I know you're greedy, but how many musical elements did you snag from other characters, man? I guess Toby just wasn't satisfied, in spite of the heavy-handed Friend theming all over the Mike zone, throwing the Freedom motif in, and straight up showing up to mug the lot in Batat. That being the minigame, not the schmo who runs it. Sure, buddy. From here, it's logical to assume that what's now Friend used to manage the Mike zone and its minigames before becoming arguably the very first Gasterpill Darkener. And if we push the interpretation just a teeny bit further, the boards in the original game they're a ROM hack of, its residence in it, and the on-brand odd controller used for our soul to access it, may also suggest Mike Friend used to have this under his administration as well. You can imagine how such an occupation might have either tipped Mike off to some of the things that Spamton was talking about to get tangled in after signing the contract, or maybe even what would eventually get himself in the most damning position of all. Friend itself has appeared at least once, but on average twice in each chapter as of 2 onward, hiding places of high darkness off of the beaten paths, always in some relation to the night and secret bosses, with the exception of Jewel because Jewel doesn't get anything. Above all else, Friend spawns in multiple times by ERAM's side in the original game. The fact that it's a summon by ERAM in its battle is a point of interest that could hint at the two's relationship, but that brings us to another meta aspect that these two have in common. Once again, like ERAM, we get Friend's working name and further role from its files, but here is where it actually has something above its companion. The naming scheme, something that many fans ought to be familiar with, and what I like to call the program files, for reasons that ought to be evident on their own. But what exactly Friend's function to the world of Deltarune or the player's connection to it actually isn't agreed upon yet, but perhaps the existence of the original game and Link to Determination have something to do with it. Although, ironically, that's where an interesting convolution arises. All of its appearances in Chapter 3, both in the exposition cutscene and throughout its home in the original game, it has mostly ordinary file names, including its left specifically, which is also unremarkably named in both 3 and 4. But while the style is normal, its contents are not, as where its title would be, it's just replaced by an extra underscore. It's not very clear as to why these files are like this, but I suggest that they reflect how Friend is native to Chapter 3's setting from his previous life as Mike. The extra underscore would act as a redaction of where his name would be, as it and his identity as a whole has been stripped away, and his laugh being the one currently demonstrated aspect of it that's gone completely unchanged when he became a program entity. But just as most of him has been twisted for the worst, how about a fun Friend factus? Friend's laugh, despite its emphasis in the game and the sweepstakes, is not necessarily an exclusive signature to it, as it is also shared by one other character, that being the Knight, which could mean nothing. Furthermore, for all intents and purposes, the original game, as part of the Sword Route, looks to be a Dark World manifestation of Cat Petter's RPG, and by extension Dragon Blazers, as everything suggests. It's thanks to Noelle's blog that we know that Friend calls the former its home, which is why it takes the form of a cat, but both are applicable, as well as greatly contrasting with the more angelic cats in the game. This actually allows us to assume two major things about Friend, though it is already partially covered by the Mike trio. Regardless, the name Mike can have a few origins, and is not just a pun on microphone. I'm not even sure if that was the original intent, but that's what we have. Anyway, for the actual origins, it could be either the Japanese cat breed Mike, or the creator of Jingle Cats, Mike Spalla, from which the PS1 game came from that Toby would later pull and recolor sprite data from, or even both. And yes, there is the classic Mike Ditka. For the second, this strongly implicates Friend as being the tail of hell from the prophecy, aka the pointed tail, aka the creature that lured Chris and Des into the shelter, hence the night connection and seemingly keeping unused company with those scratches. This one's even simpler, as cats from cat petters, like its real-life inspiration, are rendered in spheres, which is also demonstrated in the Mike zone. So combine that with the devil's tail, and boom, tail of hell. There are also arguably some allusions to this in unused content in Chapter 3. The unused Zelda-like hook shot from the boards, these bolts from the Titan Tower test, and the perspective test that uses, of all things, the snow globe texture from Noel's Weird Root Victory animation. Particularly with the last one, I'll say it could just be a coincidence and was merely a perspective test, as the name implies, but but as for why Friend would be a demon and so associated with Chris, we partially have Caddy to thank for that, it seems, as they're both known to have attempted to summon a demon together, and Caddy was the original owner of Chris's console set, so the two may have used Cat Petter's RPG as a conduit of sorts, which the royal scientist found to be cool or something, thus giving the giggly feline its overdue gaster pill. But if you want more evidence to ensure that these aren't just coincidences, talking to her front door after interacting with the shelter gives you this flavor text. Guess the animal. Why Chris wanted to summon a demon is anyone's guess right now, but maybe it was to achieve some other purpose? A prank gone wrong? A crueler plan? Darkness within their heart influencing them whether they wanted to or not? Something to do with Noel? Either way, the outcome was a decidedly maleficent creature. Reconnecting with the tale, there are some possible real-life inspirations for Friend we can look to, of which many of you have heard at least one of, beyond the archetypical Cheshire Cat, those being Watchyfield as well as Barubari from Breath of Fire 2. I'd elaborate on the details, but with how it has exploded not too long ago, and others doing my job better, I'm going to have a link to all the information, as well as this video by infozero.mp4 of moves like Gaster fame. But even without me going bit by bit, just look. Do I really have to point this out? Alrighty, looks like we've gotten all the baseline stuff settled. This means we can go further into speculation and synthesis on the two funky fuckaroos, starting appropriately with what I believe their origins are. And it's going to be akin to my Chapter 5 prediction segment from the Weird Root video, so expect a good deal of conjecture and fanfictiveness. Though, to keep things in line with what be discussed, I won't mention the Chapter 5 secret boss and the Forgotten Man in this explanation, even though I'm confident in their part in this. Likewise, not going to be adding more Noelle involvement in these events that we know of. She probably has a bigger hand in the demons and the shelter incident that we have been directed to so far, but without any hints as to what that might be outside of the many surrounding and subsequent effects, me injecting anything here would just be full-blown fanfic material. It just caused too much of a break in the pacing and believability for what I want here. Nonetheless, this is what I believe the timeline of events is. After Spamton gets big in Cyberworld, Chris and Noelle bring a bunch of items home from school and the library, which is how Tenna and Mike meet Spamton. Simultaneously, Chris and Caddy agree to try and summon a demon, another one of the humans' off-putting endeavors. The two children appropriately use Caddy's games as a conduit for the summoning. Gaster hears the dark prayer from the children, which makes Mike suddenly go missing from TV World, allowing Tenna to finally make Spamton cave. From here, Spamton gets one last phone call from his advisor, leading to a rush backstage to meet his once friend and a mysterious cloaked individual. With the thorn ring in hand and eyes burned by the light of the truth, he's set to reclaim the now crumbling status by helping the angel achieve the forbidden root. Back on the side of the light world, the effects of the ritual may not have been immediate, but Chris could tell that something was haunting them and Noelle in their games and in their real life. Looking almost like glass, it was a black, heterochromatic cat with a bead-like pointed tail and a jagged smile from which a horrible cackle would sound. Knowing her protectiveness and belief in the darkness and supernatural, Chris enlists Des to help capture the demon they've brought into the world. On a rainy day, they track it down past the church, cornering it inside the conspicuously open doors of the shelter. But from there, many things of Chris were lost. A lost headband, a lost hand, a lost childhood, a lost girl. But gained was a black shard, a parasite due to control their soul, and a debt to pay to their friend. As the doors slammed shut with Des and the demon still inside, there was nothing anyone could do at that time. From there, Chris became far more closed off and less ambitious and with less self-appreciation, allowing their relationship with Noelle to atrophy as their own family also falls apart. Now left with the only newly knighted Des on one side and her mother on the other, both serving to boss Chris around to hopefully bring a better outcome in their own eyes. Chris may have come to accept their current position, albeit still apprehensive, with their new friends that spark a glimmer of hope with the community they've once lacked for so long. However, what they haven't realized yet was that their headband, the symbol of their impulses, intrusive and destructive thoughts, social problems, and the source of their overwhelming guilt on the whole situation and subsequent breaking of ties, had formerly been given new life within the same godforsaken place where everything went wrong. Just as the nightmare had essentially created the pointed tail in turn created the nightmare. Before they know it and the cat are back in their life again, and they cannot ignore it anymore, nor what they have in store for Chris themselves, their friends, or the deity controlling their soul. The freedom they so desire to use to subvert the prophecy remains with strings attached, pulled by the skeletal abomination behind it all, its underlings, the other lives they sought to ruin for their own gain, and ultimately the overpowering stowaway with them that can decide on a whim to salvage or sabotage their life and everyone else's through the grand scheme all over again. So, what do y'all think of that interpretation? Is it reasonable? Do I conject too much? Is it too samey? I hope it's not too samey. Feel free to make your own adjustments in the comments, but I'm feeling pretty good about this one, despite my previously described cuts. But hey, if this wasn't controversial enough for some of y'all, this next segment might be. So let's just rip the bandage off. I've been advised to stress that this is my opinion by a friend who looked this over, so I believe Chris is just the Deltarune universe's version of Frisk and Kara as a single person, rather than remaining separate. They have a large and growing number of connections and parallels to these two humans, even down to their appearance and name, and is even emphasized outside of the game. This is not a reduction of Chris as an individual with their own identity. Would anyone say that the likes of Undyne, Monster Kid, or Asgore are less of individuals just because they exist essentially intact in both universes? No, of course not, because that would be fucking stupid. So don't start being stupid when it comes to Chris, okay? Okay, back to ERAM. You can think of ERAM as a sort of externalization of Chris's Geno-Kara-ness, just much more proactive than the real thing. What I consider the biggest piece of evidence for this, outside of what's on the surface, is the vending machine in the S-Rank room. Whether this is specifically ERAM's doing or also includes Friend, it looks like we're getting more or less what we asked for when the fans first got digging into the previous game. To say nothing of what else Smile means in this series. Oopsies. Whether a literal manifestation of Undertale Kara shows up in this next world is neither here nor there, probably won't, but the function of which may be real, and there's nowhere to run when it is already here. And let me tell ya, even though I already made sure to stress the demon's potential relations to the flowers, me typing all this out has just now made me realize that Chapter 5 is going to be yet more familially and cosmically gut-wrenching than I had proposed prior. My goodness. Keeping with Kara, don't forget who has the power to either heal or harm. We use our determination to bend the narrative and the world into either a better shape or eventually breaking it in two, and every one of its characters, including our host and parasite along with it, to the point of rebellion. And that's just an Undertale, as Deltarune also deals in the creation of these worlds in the strict narrative, using that very same power for both. Our relationship with our more consolidated and further rebellious host is granted more emphasis, and it's our role to be either their angel or their devil. If we follow their internalized shortcomings to exacerbate their internal ones, we can rest assured that freedom may be attained in the future, just not a prosperous future. Sorry Chris, but $25 is $25.
Let's go.
To avoid giving y'all Chris fatigue, I suggest that we take a gander at some of the other characters whose paths seem to cross with the devilish duo. Our first set here is the shopkeepers of Ram and Sham. They both know more than they should and are related to multiple secret bosses, yet are seemingly not gaster-pilled themselves. How either of them came to know as much as they do is a mystery, especially on Sham's part with how explicit they make their own end of things so far. There is no way that Jewel covers all of that. Maybe both of their appearances, Sham's classroom origin, and Ram's name and occupation have something to do with it, but regardless, I wish to see a happy or maybe even just bittersweet ending for both of these individuals. Maybe a couple boss fights? Sham rip her sword for Chris as a toast to the end of the world? Ram becoming canon and getting closure on that? It'd be so cool, Toby. Moving on to another character, who I know many of you have been screaming at me to mention this whole time, someone we've all been expecting to gain relevance in the coming chapters, but not at all how it would come to be foreshadowed. Jockington, or as I like to call him, Jockington G. Jockington. Page of the Antichrist. Okay, this is still speculation as to what exactly his prophecy has to do with the grander scheme, particularly with Noel, Friend, and the Titans, made even worse by his close friendship with Caddy, and our bizarre lack of any timeline for this dude yet, but like, it's not looking good for him. Most shockingly is that he's not only in the Deltarune prophecy, where only Dark World related things appear, but also he's the only character, the one single character, mentioned by name. Not just a title. The Radical Serpent may still be funny, but his degrading speech quirk is genuinely worrying, and that cannot be a good sign for where things are going for him. Whether he's actually malicious or some kind of unwitting host for Friend or something like that, maybe the cat's tail really is a snake after all, but there are still some things that we can reasonably presume. Jockington will grow the beard, and Gonington will be real. Trust. In order to not regret these omissions later, I will very briefly give the Forgotten Man and Chapter 5 Secret Boss their time. For the former, the man also has various links in the usual ways, and further connected directly with the shelter, being the epicenter for these opposing parties. It seems to me that, as opposed to the demons representing Chris's mistakes and guilt, the Forgotten Man personified the repression of that trauma and attempting to heal from it, emphasized by the man's encounters being more obscured or even impossible if you follow the example of that trauma. And furthermore, there's the Michael bomb. If you know, you know. Could say, as we follow along with both the man and Friend, we might find the roots of Chris's problems. And on the flip side, there is the Chapter 5 Secret Boss, who right now seems to be either Asgore's gold or blue flowers from his wedding bouquet, or even both. In other words, I don't think Friend will be the designated secret boss for the chapter, or be an active part in the fight, unlike the intentionally bizarre Chapter 3. As explained in the Weird Root video, the demons likely sourced the thorn ring from the flower, acting as part of the whole twisted marriage and love thing going on with Chris and Noel within the root, and the Darkner themselves would be a stand-in for Flowey and the bevy of familial and Generu elements that arise from the whole situation. Y'all can certainly expect to see more of this before Chapter 5 releases, as we get more teases and news, so if you know what's good for you, you'd subscribe to stay tuned for that sort of thing. One last subject I want to touch on before the end is things that we have very little on yet, as well as some hopes for the future. Weird Root and Sword Root having many Undertale callbacks. Important, but too out there for this video's topics, so more on that in its own time. Friend in Chapter 5. With everything going on with Asgore, and as a way to lead into Chapter 6 with a big reveal, we may see Lil Michael take Crawl to the shelter after we hear Heaven's Call. Or something like that. Related to the shelter, since Tessa's guitar has the holiday code for its lock, she definitely has some history prior to getting got, but what that is isn't otherwise hinted at yet, so I've got nothing for now. Overworld ERAM encounter. Also expecting big things from them, including a more standard style of boss fight for their rematch, and whatever their quote-unquote work is that they have to do. The fight against it, as well as Friends, better have the freedom motif. Finally, literally anything that might happen with Spam Tentena and the fakes. They'll definitely be affected by the increased friend fuckery, which I'll love to see, as well as whatever that door-looking thingy is. Okay, that may be everything I have to say on Friend and ERAM. Looks like I should thank and congratulate y'all for watching today's video. What's going on with the music? What is that sound? No. Alright, I know I'm not the first to say this at this point, and technically it's not even my own first time, but don't dismiss me as insane when I say that IC really looks like it has something to do with ERAM. Yeah, the Nightmare and Gaster connections are there, but that has to be about the end of it, right? Well, no. The most pressing part of this is the burning eyes. Yeah, ERAM doesn't just trace forward to Spamton and Chris through this, as Noel's earliest blog post, hosted by Des, recounts the icy pizza box that spooked the skittish fun in the dark, which only Des believes and burned its eyes out, and Chris then using it as a mask to further traumatize the poor girl. Not only does this pan out into so much regarding the game, but it also demonstrates a connection to both ice, obviously, and fire, which ERAM itself also demonstrates. Like this, and this, and this, and this. To be clear, I'm not at all saying that ERAM is literally IC, nor is this an IC video from which I can elaborate on every plausible avenue Toby could take with his FNAF reject. But I will say, if the icy pizza sign isn't replaced with Nightmare, I would eat my shoe, if I had one. Thus, finally, concludes my friend and ERAM video of 2026. Yes, I was actually able to make this without Toby inadvertently sabotaging me with a newsletter or random lore tease on Bluesky. Huzzah! Though, if I've missed anything, please let me know below, and I'll probably fit any additions or corrections into the Forgotten Man or original game videos later. I am once again so sorry for the delays, but also thank y'all for coming regardless. Thanks also to my friend Alchemy for proofreading my scripts every so often, such as this one. But despite all my troubles, it looks like I've got pep in my step once again. Though, admittedly, I may need a little break from these longer videos. So for next time, how about I treat myself and my audience to the mystery option in the poll. Y'all will see what it is in due time. Take care until then.